Okay, hello, it's Paul Green from the business community doing a spotlight on interview. We've not done one of these for a while, but all of a sudden Richard popped up out of the blue and said he'd be happy to do one. So I thought, that's okay, we can find a slot. So here we are. So welcome, Richard. Thanks for coming along. Just want to introduce yourself to whoever might be viewing this and let them know who you are and what you do.
Yeah, by all means, I have a habit of that just popping out of nowhere. Yeah, so I'm Richard Osborne. I'm the founder of Business Data Group and UK Business Forums. Business Data Group is a platform that provides reports and analysis into what's going on in the economy for small business. And UK Business Forums is an online support community for small business owners that's been going for 20 years now.
Excellent, excellent. So the idea of these is to sort of like prod and poke you and sort of like work out what makes you tick and hopefully get a few insights into your business journey and maybe also, pick up on some advice and tips that you may give in the conversation that any business that's listening to this, can take and use themselves. The first question I like to start off with is, how did you get to where you are today? What's your sort of business journey that's got you to now running the Business Data Group and the UK Business Forums?
That's the way you phrase that's quite a long question to answer. So my business journey running a business started in 1999, and probably not the most orthodox way of getting into a business, but I was in the middle of a nervous breakdown and in depression, and things were collapsing around me really due to issues I'd had growing up. And I was in a situation where the job I had at the time, things were falling apart with me. I couldn't keep on top of the projects I was running. Things that happen when you have a breakdown. I couldn't face getting a job. I didn't even know how to get a job. Well, I knew how to get a job, but I couldn't face applying for and doing it. So I left my job I had and started doing website design at home. And that's literally was my first step into running my own business, and that was in 1999. And within a couple of months at the same time, I also got married as well, which was something you usually do in those sort of times as well, because starting a business isn't stressful enough.
Yeah, you obviously like a challenge, Richard.
I do. To get to where I am now, that's a bit of a sort of windy journey. The web design company ended up being, I say sold, I basically lost the business to somebody in a dodgy business deal that didn't really go to plan a couple of years later. And I spent a year working for this other company. And then I started another business, and which I ended up selling, and another business I ended up selling. And then what is Business Data Group started life as a company called e-filing in 2007, funded out of the money that I'd made from originally selling UK Business Forums in 2007. And it's sort of grown and evolved from there.
Okay, and it's so if we focus a little bit on the UK Business Forum, so it's sort of come round, I guess, full circle, one would say, because you've now, or recently in the last sort of few years, have bought back UK Business Forum. So what was the idea? Having got rid of it a few years back and then deciding to sort of like bring it back into the fold. What was the reasoning and the thoughts behind that?
I'll cover sort of what UK Business Forum stands for, because that gives some idea as to sort of part of the reason why I sold it. So in 2003, I was in a situation where I was trying to build up a business, but I was on my own. I was married, had a young daughter at the time, but and I found this to be the case with so many people, when you run your own business and you are on your own, so you don't have a board of directors or co-founders or other people to bounce ideas around, or even not even a management team around you, you literally are on your own. You have nobody to speak to, really. You have nobody to sound out, or nobody who's a peer in the same sort of going through what you're going through, who understands the worries you're having. And so in that situation back in those days, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, social media, the term social media didn't exist, and social media didn't exist as it does today. So putting up a website with a forum, as it was at the time, was the done thing. And UK Business Forums was born. And as it turned out, just by putting the word out there, spreading on a few news groups, emailing a few people, eventually what happened is it turns out there were thousands upon thousands upon tens of thousands of people very quickly within the first 12 months who were all in the same boat. And UK Business Forums grew to the point where I think it was about 50,000 members, all communicating online on these forums, all supporting each other by the time I was approached by a media company in 2007 and sold them. And then UK Business Forums continued to grow under that media company to a point where there's about 50,000 people a day were accessing the community for help and support, peer support from each other. Separately, the money from that sale funded what is today Business Data Group, which is built up and running as it is. But during the COVID pandemic, two things came to light. One was, like so many businesses during the pandemic, we're exposed to a vulnerability in the business. I don't know other way to do it, say it other than literally a lot of our revenue was generated from particular sources, and those sources dried up during the pandemic. So we needed to find another way of building a business case. The other aspect was UK Business Forums, the people who sold it to, had already been approaching me for a couple of years saying, do we want to buy it back? Because we're going down a different tangent and we don't know what to do with UK Business Forums. Put all that into a big mixing blender, and through other work that I'm involved in, and even through networking and my involvement with the Chamber and things that have happened over recent years, you see people still face the same challenges and same issues they do today as they were 20 years ago. So needing something that supports businesses, but also looking at what is there available in the marketplace to support businesses that there isn't. So there's lots of advice out there and there's lots of support out there, but it's very scattered out across many different sources. UK Business Forums is already an established brand, high traffic site, high membership. We've got hundreds of thousands of members within there. So let's put all those free resources and information available on that platform for people, whether it's ranging from a business plan template, a cash flow forecast template, business guides, a community on there that we can just give away. And then from the business ourselves, Business Data Group has technology we built where we can monetize that basically through advertising as a short form answer. It just all made sense to buy it back. And there is a sort of a sentiment there that how UK Business Forums helped me when I was in a pretty dark time trying to start on my own, and being able to sort of, and I know it sounds so corny, but give back and keep that resource going for people. I just wanted to buy it back.
Yeah, I think it's something like that is a great resource to have, because my experience is, as you touched on, small businesses or new small businesses tend to make the same mistakes that more established businesses made 5-10 years ago. So it's like, if you can short circuit that and have new businesses make different mistakes rather than the same ones, then hopefully the stats would be higher on new business startups being successful, because I know the stats are still against someone being successful, but those resources are out there, and UK Business Forums is a great platform to go and get that information rather than try and reinvent the wheel yourself. So I from what you've said, you've created a number of successful businesses, sold a few, bought a few back. I'm not sure what your future plans are there. So I know there's a label that you don't like. I know some people sort of like cast on you, which is sort of like the word entrepreneur. So I thought I'd just explore that a little bit, and just sort of understand what would you prefer to be seen as, and what is it against the entrepreneur word that you don't tend to like?
It's an awkward one to answer, that one, because I'm going to contradict myself. The problem with the word entrepreneur, in my personal opinion, and there will be people that disagree with that, and I don't mind, that's, people, different opinions, fine, is that it's become commoditized. So anybody, if they are in a leadership position of a business, everybody from government, marketing, everybody calls everybody an entrepreneur. And the problem is there are so many different definitions of it, depending what websites you look at, the dictionary definition and so on, that you kind of get it why it's sort of just everybody just calls everybody an entrepreneur. My personal definition of it is more along somebody who overcomes adversity to create something greater than themselves that they can pass on and bring people along with them on that journey, or variations on that theme. Somebody who is a good business person, who knows how to run a business, and you can almost like put somebody into that. Here's a business, can you run it? Is a good business person. And then you have the term founder as well. So somebody, which I used earlier, somebody who founded something. So there's so many different definitions. The reason why I contradict myself, but I don't like the term because it's just overused, is I can appreciate why some people turn around and call me an entrepreneur, but it's not my place and not my right to call, as I feel, to call myself an entrepreneur. An entrepreneur is a title that somebody else will give you. That's how I feel about it.
No, I agree with you. I think it is an overutilized word, and people just sort of bandy it about. And I know people out there, call themselves entrepreneurs, but they're not necessarily that successful. They haven't got something that has a legacy that's going to be a short-lived thing. So I think most small businesses that are entrepreneurial, I can sort of like get that, because there is a certain spirit, I think, for anybody to sort of jump into this madness and start your own business. So there's got to be, but I think the entrepreneur word is something that should be bestowed on somebody rather than a person claiming it for themselves. But I'm sure the people out there that have a different view on it, but there you go. So
I'd use the if you're looking at something that people are familiar with in Dragon's Den, and if either of these ever watch these and watch this and then turn around and never want to speak to me, then so it. But if you think of on Dragon's Den, the likes of Duncan Bannatyne and the likes of Peter Jones, both very successful people who have achieved things that I would only dream upon. So not taking any of them away from them, but when you look at their backstory and the history of what's published, and I've read both books on each of them, using what definition I would use for an entrepreneur, I would assign Duncan Bannatyne as an entrepreneur with the journey that he's been through. And I would say Peter Jones is a very successful and very astute and clever businessman, just by definition of adversity, overcome, challenges, journey, what they've been through, based on reading both their books.
Well, I'm sure everybody's got their own interpretation. So I asked people, like, you're probably on the subject of books, you're probably familiar with Simon Sinek's can't remember the name of the book now, but anyway, he talks about what is your why. So it's really sort of like, what's the driving force that gets you out of bed each morning to sort of fight the good fight. So what is it for you, Richard? What do you think that motivation each day is?
With anybody who runs their own business and has done for a while, I would suggest that their why or their drive changes over time as they go through different stages of their life. And that's been the same for me. The reason or the why I started my very first business was out of the closest, I would say, desperation. I felt there was no other choice. There was no other options open to me. So that was all I could do. And at that point, it was just hand to mouth, day to day. That's all it was. When my daughter, I've got two children now, but when my first child was born, my daughter, that why changed like overnight. It was like, holy shit, I've got a life to support. And everything that I think back of some of the experiences I've had, which you heard the presentation I gave on Wednesday. So where, I've had time where I've lived in a women's hostel to before my wife's parents took me in, before we were sort of married, I was sleeping on a mattress on somebody's floor with my worldly possessions in a small pile next to the mattress. So you think of that and various aspects of what I experienced. I'm thinking, I don't want my children to go through that. And a switch just went inside, and my determination that I need to create something more than what's about what I'm just putting food on the table and going up and push forward. That my daughter's 20 years old now, so hard to believe. It shocks me every time I think about it. And my why has evolved somewhat significantly now, where I'm actually I want this organization, I want this business to outlive me and create an environment where I have members of the team here who can take over the reins and give them a platform or something they can whether grow into, take over, run, that's not me. And then personally, separately, I'm looking at my own life gradually over years to, coming years, to step aside. And what's more important to me is supporting other businesses, whether that be even like my daughter's business, because she runs her own business now, or others where I can help others achieve what they want to achieve. The business now, it's not my business. It's a vehicle to create jobs and wealth for others.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because do you think it's a very broad sweeping statement, but in your experience with the small businesses that you've met and you're involved with, do you find that they start off with any sort of vision? That they look. So you've created. Go around the houses with this. We'll get there. We'll get to the point in a minute. You've obviously created businesses, sold the business. When you did those, when you started them, did you think, I'm looking to generate this to a certain amount, and in 5 years I'll look for sale? And do you think that business owners actually have that vision, or do they just dive in and hope for the best and then sort of evolve as time goes forward and work out an exit strategy then?
For me personally, I've got somebody I met many years ago as a co-director of a company that my first boss that I spoke about on Wednesday. He turned around to me and said, speaking about our boss at the time, business owners never really make any money until they sell their business. They're always the last people to pay themselves. They put everybody else's salary or salary increases in front of each other. In front of themselves. So they're the last people to benefit from the success of a business. And that's always stuck with me as sort of thinking, right, if I'm going to start a company, I need to think about what the end game is. Now, I've not thought about that historically in any depth, other than I need to build something that has some value that somebody will buy at some point in the future. And the sales that I've had have been kind of opportunistic that have come along. But I don't make any secret, and everybody who works within the team here knows that this company is my pension fund, my retirement fund. So at some point I do want to retire, because I don't want to be working, bless her, like the Queen till the day I die. I'd like to enjoy a retirement, and this business is my pension fund. And I feel being honest about that with the team, but also in doing that, the team here, everything, if I can create a career path for people and help them develop their own careers, their skill sets and everything around them, they're all part and parcel of that. Based on what I've seen on UK business forums though, not many people who start up in business start up with the end goal of exiting the business. The majority, just based on my own personal experience of people I've spoken to or seen or questions I've been asked, start doing a business because they see something they can do to earn themselves, or the perception is to earn themselves more money or a better work-life balance than they had doing that same thing for somebody else.
Just got a little comment from Mark, so thanks for tuning in, Mark. So he's affirmed what you say and agrees with your views, so vote of confidence.
Thank
there.
You, Mark.
One of the questions that I sometimes ask, which I'm probably going to word a little bit differently, I guess, because I usually ask people what makes you different from your competitors, but I guess because you've got a number of different businesses, I guess my question to you is, when you've set up these businesses, have you looked for something that has got a competitive edge or a gap in the market or something like that? Well, what led you to decide to create the business you created over time?
So try and think. So from the beginning, it was just something I could do. So I was primarily one of those people. It's something I can do. I can build a website. I can make some money doing that. If I think about where things are today, because I'm a massive advocate of having competition, because I feel if you don't have competition, you become complacent. And there's nothing like having a bit of competition to keep you on your toes. Some people may disagree with that. And two examples of that will be, so we have a product called e-filing. Now that product e-filing, I quite, I will pat myself on the back a little bit, like how I built that up. So created some technology that allowed people to set up companies online. Was one of the very first in the UK even doing that, grew significantly, knew that people were going to copy me. So I gave the software away for free. That built up volume, because why wouldn't you use some free software to give you a competitive advantage? That's how other people started to use that technology. Then did some deals with some organizations that generated a lot of revenue, and then gave that revenue, like a huge percentage of that revenue, to the people using the product. And we've saturated the market. It's a great position to be in, but we don't have any competition at all whatsoever in that market. So it makes it difficult to think about where to improve. And the only way you get that is from the customer saying, we like a bit of this, like a bit of that. But sometimes, as we all experience, sometimes customers think they know what they want for one particular bit, but sometimes change is difficult or her own BP. So you have to try and balance across a whole range of bits of feedback and think, how do we keep innovating and developing that product when there's nothing to compare it to? When you take UK business forums, there's a lot of, as I mentioned earlier, different platforms out there that support businesses. So there you've got an opportunity to look at and you put them in all different, we're building something that's quite a conglomerate together of different pieces of a sort of content, let's call it. So we look at different places in the market and say, well, they're leading in that, and you can then innovate and think, well, how can we improve on that? And that's great, because then you have got something to compare it to. And if somebody does something better than you, like, I slept on my laurels, I need to keep my game up. And I like that sort of challenge. I like that bit of competition that sort of keeps pushing you forward. And there's nothing worse than being complacent and lazy in an industry, and then the innovation doesn't happen.
Yeah, well, when I started running my own network groups, it was very much, to have it be an open network, so there is no lockout, any business is welcome, and I believe that a bit of healthy competition, doesn't go amiss. It has you sort of like hone your message, hone your game, make sure you know what is going to distinguish you from your competitors. But also, I think it's in pretty much every sector. I've seen collaboration between seemingly on paper competitors. So Mark Costa, who commented earlier, is very much collaborative. He's worked with other graphic designers. They've shared work between each other. Whereas, on paper, they're both doing the same thing, but it doesn't work that way. And I think that I think competitors can work together, so it's healthy for both sides, I think. So yeah, absolutely, I agree with you.
It's the same analogy on the high street. So you'll have a lot of food locations on the high street, because then they bring everybody to the yard, to quote a song, but they bring the sort of the passing trade all together. And many people have particular niches. So talking about graphics designers, as the only exam result I really got of note is art and design. I can do a wonderful watercolor painting or charcoal drawings. Everything else I've had to learn since I left school. So I have a particular skill set when it comes to design, but not other areas. So by working together, competitors can bring each other's businesses along, increase their profits, increase the opportunities that are open to them, whereas they may normally turn somebody away. Where if they work in collaboration, everybody benefits from it. I would just say, word of advice is just make sure I disagree with this statement to its full extent, but to a degree, no friends in business. Some people turn around and say that. I disagree with that to a degree, but you do have to protect yourself. So if you're going to work in collaboration with somebody, then have some form of written agreement or contract in place between you that protects the both of you mutually between you.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mark has done that, you know, with the relationships he builds with the people he works with. He has that in place, so people are clear how the structure is. So yeah, absolutely. Whatever you do, sort of don't wing it, I guess is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it might not work out for you. So if you weren't busy enough, I know because our paths have crossed on charitable work. So do you want to say a little bit about, again, what inspired you to get involved with charities, the type of charities you're involved with now? I think you're a trustee or something of maybe your own charity, but we'll find out about that. So yeah, just tell us a little bit about your
So,
charity journey.
so as many people will see, there are a lot of charities out there, and you can walk through the town, particularly this time of year, and there are so many good causes that anybody can support. And some advice that was given to me many years ago was pick the causes you want to stick to and stick to them, because you can't help everybody, and then you'd end up giving away any of your income and anything like that. You just wouldn't be able to cope. So pick what your causes are and stick to them and do them well. The two causes that I support personally are related to young people with special needs or learning difficulties, and disengaged youth or disenfranchised youth. The latter ones I'll cover on first, because that's where our paths have crossed.
Yeah,
Is
yeah,
a charity, it used to be called Youth at Risk.
yeah,
Great. They haven't done anything in this region lately, which I have dropped them a line about.
yeah.
So I've ended up doing some of that personally, where people have known me or approached me directly saying, there's a young person here, would you support them or mentor or coach them? And this is really young people who often are identified by social services, the local authority or the schools, or maybe out of school, who are at risk of exclusion, or maybe have been excluded from school and getting in with the wrong crowds, to use that kind of
Yeah.
expression. What I hope to do, and it's always hope to do, you can never, but what I try to do whenever I'm working with young people there is to inspire them. I almost cringe saying that word, but it is to try and inspire them to focus on a path ahead of them that takes them down a legitimate, potentially business route. And my thinking there is the people who think differently, who challenge the norm, and often these are where these children might be considered the troublesome ones in school. They're the people who think differently, and I would argue are the entrepreneurs of tomorrow, who really do shake up industries, create great businesses by just breaking the mold around it. But ultimately, these are often within schools where the young people are just disengaged with everything around them and need somebody who will be that person they can rely on. So thinking about the grit training we've both been through, where quite often these young people have never had an adult that they can rely upon, never have an adult who's actually going to listen to them, let them their voice be heard, and talk through whatever it is with them. And the sort of coaching work that we do within Grit, or I do independently, is sitting down with these young people, 2 ears, 1 mouth, listen to them, go through, talk, and you don't. There's what I love about that kind of work is there's no wrong. It's just, what do you want? Where do you want to take yourself? Let's work through those different options in front of you, and just get them to think differently about their lives, their future. And the reality is there, you could speak to 10 of them and you may only break through with 3 or 4 of them, but you still keep chipping away at that. And that's my reason behind that. Is I was one of those kids, and my life was turned around by a number of things. A big part was played by a small business owner who invested in me. The other aspects, the learning difficulties and special needs, that came around because I was, this is before the local enterprise partnerships that exist now, and I was basically asked by the local enterprise partnership, we're looking at piloting a project for that the government's thinking might roll out nationally. It's connecting businesses with schools, and there's a special needs school that's applied. Your got experience with working with young people. You're the most experienced person working with young people in the network we've got. Would you work with a special needs school? And I was quite unnerved by that, because I had these preconceived ideas of what special needs actually meant. As it happens, jump forward a couple of years from there, my son ended up being diagnosed with dyslexia and high functioning autism, and we went through a whole load of heartache there, fighting for support. He ended up going to the school for a couple of years where I was volunteering as an enterprise advisor, as it was there. And now I'm actually vice chair of governors at that school, and I've got very involved in there. And it's really, as soon as I started to get involved, and I actually got to see how difficult it is for young people with learning difficulties to get into any form of meaningful work, employment. The opportunities are just closed off to them. The statistics are heart-wrenching. And it just became, this is just completely wrong. And I just got more and more involved in it. And as an individual and as a company, we support organisations like TRACK for supporting autistic people into work. As an employer, I would welcome anybody with any particular learning difficulties or special needs into employing them here. And my ambition in the work that I do there is to improve the employability and career opportunities for people with learning difficulties. And the work that Northgate School, which is where I'm a governor of, is fantastic. But it's not just, I've become connected with a number of schools and people within the local community who do such great work there. And that's where I focus my energies, on those two channels.
I mean, I certainly concur with what you said. My experience when I started with Youth at Risk, as it was back in the 90s. And at the time I got no experience of working with young people. One of my colleagues that I used to work with, he'd done one of the first programs in the UK, took us along to an open evening. I wasn't giving anything back at that point, just sort of purely focused on my own selfish self. But yeah, I got involved with it. And, what you touched on earlier is that, these kids just need a focus, because my first program was down in Sutton, and there used to be a group called the Sutton Posse, which were basically robbing everything and causing chaos, and the police weren't able to handle it. And we managed to get some of the young people that were involved in that. And the irony is, to run a posse by the sort of suggested name of it, you need leadership skills. Someone was the leader, and they were leading that gang. We're quite, would demonstrate some quite good managerial and leadership skills, but the focus was obviously not in a thing that's going to contribute to society. And all a lot of these kids need is just some direction and refocusing, so they realise that their skills can be used elsewhere, and they don't need to be dragged down necessarily by the environment or the community in which they've been brought up. They've got a choice in it. They can choose something different. And as you say, it just isn't going to impact every single person that you touch, but hopefully it will make a difference to enough that it that it has their lives be better going forward. So yeah, anybody listening to this, if you're not involved in some sort of charity work, I found it very fulfilling. It helped me with my coaching skills, my communication skills, my facilitation skills, none of which are obviously showing up today, so I've obviously failed. But I learned a hell of a lot, and I was lucky that I got the companies that I was working for to actually give me unpaid leave to go along on some of the residential courses that Youth at Risk used to run in those days. And that in itself was quite something that's quite unheard of in my day, for companies to sort of look at what's now known as sort of CSR, corporate social responsibility, to do that. Whereas now I know companies do encourage their staff to take time off and go and contribute so many days a year. So that was something.
Well, we give people paid leave to go and work for a charity that is important to that individual. So I don't dictate to my staff, you have to support this charity or that charity, but we do give them paid leave, effectively like additional holiday, but that holiday has to be used for working within a charity. And I won't embarrass her in case she's watching this, but picking up on your comment about developing your leadership skills, the training that you're familiar with, how intense the training is for GRIT, Youth at Risk, and that changed my own management style. And one of my team complimented me on my management style and said, how can I learn to manage in the style that you do? And those words are on that. And I recommended Grit, and also, in fact, I'm actually got contact with Tony, who does the training at Grit, as part of this team development and training we do here. That's how much it's helped my business, and also my own engagement and way that I engage with my staff and people that work for me. I apply that same coaching techniques as a management style.
Well, I was certainly the David Brent, I think, when I was a manager way back when. So I've learned some things, from my involvement with it. And I think, most people that do get involved in charities do actually get something back from it. So at the time of recording, the last couple of years have been a nightmare for most businesses, having gone through the challenge of COVID, a sort of recession, sort of like potentially imminent. I think we'll know next quarter whether we're in a recession, inflation, etc., etc. The small business have had quite a lot to face. Well, outside of COVID per se, what would you say is the biggest challenge that you've faced on your journey today?
On me personally, I'd probably say most of them are of my own doing, from a lack of knowledge or experience, and just sort of like, I'm going to give it a go. The things that impacted me the most, where things really went, where I felt things have just gone bad, have generally been around not having people around me to sort of act as a sounding board or accountability or peers. So when I think back to before UKBF, the reason for that is I was just trying everything, trying to see what, throw enough things out there and something might stick, and just sort of flailing around and not having a network to speak to or support. And networks can work in so many different ways, whether it is a business community such as yours, Paul, your UK business forums, networking groups themselves. There's various ways out there, but actually having other people to sound check for. Today, I have a board of directors, so it's my board meeting this coming Friday. So I'm frantically putting together my MI, my management information, my exec summary, and things like that to literally say, "This is how I'm doing, guys." It's all right. And they've been great for me as it is in today's world. But when I go back and think about some of the mistakes I've made, it's because I've literally just been winging. I remember once I got suckered into paying £10,000 for an advert in a magazine, which included 200 copies of the magazine for me to distribute. What am I going to do with 200 copies? But I got suckered into it, and then these big boxes of this magazine just appeared at the office. My wife went mental, said, "What are you spending?" And we couldn't really afford it. But I just didn't run it past anybody. I think the biggest issue I've had in the past, or the mistakes I've had, are times where I've literally tried everything and had no focus. And having people around you, they can just be equal business owners, friends, you can build in contacts you make. You just say, "Can I sound you out on something?" And you support each other. It really doesn't matter what shape it takes, but somebody to stop you just losing focus on what you're trying to do and end up trying everything and being a master of nothing.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So if you are a small business out there, you haven't got a board, you haven't got sort of people around you, go and find them. Most people that run their small businesses, I think the majority will find time to help you or advise you. Just look at somebody that you can. I've used you historically, Richard, to sort of sit as a sounding board, and it's useful for someone to tell you, don't do that. It's a totally ridiculous thing to do, And I think from that point of view, certainly over the last couple of years, what I've found really useful is I've been doing a virtual pub, which funny enough still exists, even though we're back to being able to go face to face. And I think nearly everybody on that we're all small business owners. And I think everybody on that has found that a useful forum, particularly during the sort of like the COVID years, if you like, to bounce ideas off of and sort of get some feedback and, ask the questions in a friendly environment, but with an environment where they are actually going to tell you directly help things on. So there's always a danger of getting into an echo chamber, if people are familiar with that expression, where you'll just hear what you want to hear, which doesn't help.
Nothing worse than an echo chamber.
So it's getting that balance really of those people around you that I know are going to be challenging and aren't just going to be yes people, that are going to, you know, to fully sort of comprehend what you're asking them and what you're trying to do. So yeah, those people are out there. You know, if you haven't got those people, go and find them. So just the last few things then. So if you were to give one top tip for any business out there of your experience today, what would that be if you were to pick one?
I think sort of an elongated piece of advice really is first of all, you know, if you're going to start a business, then your first step has to be, you've got to be totally committed to it. I've listened to a fantastic spoken word artist called Sully Briggs, who gave a talk once, spoken word, talking to parents about, if you're always focusing and telling your child to have a backup plan, what you're basically telling them is you don't have confidence in their dream. And I would always say, let me insert a caveat here. It depends where you are in your life, because if you've got mortgages and kids support, then your sort of risk appetite's a little bit different. So putting that caveat to one side, put everything into your dream, your focus, and then make sure you are committed to it. So your why, like what you asked me earlier, has to be so strong, because you're going to hit all sorts of obstacles and challenges. And there's going to be times where you're going to sit there and feel like, why have I done this? What am I doing? And you have to have the strength to get over those. And then alongside that, connect with some other people in a similar boat to you, in whichever platform that says. Now, I would naturally plug UK Business Forums as an online platform because I'm wearing the colours and that sort of thing. But there are others out there. As said, Paul, you've got Business Community and the virtual pub you mentioned there. So connect yourself with some other business owners who are in a similar boat to you or have been there, and work with them as a sounding board, as peers, whether that's over a pint or however much be, to help you keep on focused on what you're doing. Because the danger, especially in the early stages of business, is to try and do whatever you can to pay the bills. Go off on so many different tangents that then not only do you lose focus on what you're trying to build and what you're trying to achieve, but so do your customers lose sight of actually what is it you do. Because if your message isn't clear, what it is that you actually provide, what your service is, because you do a little bit of everything, then people end up using you for nothing, because they just won't. Customers, buyers need to be able to pigeonhole you in, if I need that product or service, that's where I go, and you need to make it easy for them. So if you're going off in all different tangents, you'd end up with no customers, because nobody will know what it is you do. So find yourself some peers that you can who support each other. Say I can plug UK Business Forums for that, or Business Community, as well as others. And so you've got people that are in the same boat as you, that you can build a relationship up as supporting each other, and keep your focus on what you're doing, and have a strong enough why or drive to get you through the difficult times. If you find yourself thinking of throwing in the towel in the first 6 months, then your drive wasn't strong enough to really do it. And some people, it's not right. It's not for them.
Yeah, I think you've got to have a resilience and a tenacity as a small business owner, and definitely a focus. You know, because you're never quite sure what's going to be thrown at you next. So you know, and having that support network around, I think, is important. So what one? Mari's just popped up. I know you know Mari quite well. So in the
as long as it's on hands free.
Yeah, stop steering with your knees, Mari. So one final thing before we finally wrap up. Then you mentioned before we came live, you've got your own podcast. So do you want to tell people what it's called, where to find it, and literally what that's about, why they should tune in?
It's called Drive, the Small Business Podcast from UKBF, and it's available on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, TuneIn, basically wherever you get your podcast from. If you search Drive Small Business Podcast, it should come up there with my mug on it, with blue background, which is actually the barn door of my daughter's business. On there. And really, what it's about, the thing that I am fascinated, but also have such admiration for small business owners, because they make up 99% of the entire, like, all businesses in the country. And the thing that nobody really would realise is you could be standing in the queue at the newsagents or at the petrol station, and the person in front of you, behind you, could be a small business owner. They may have 5, 10, 15 staff, and then they're sitting there waiting to pay for their petrol. But in the forefront of their mind, they're sitting there thinking, if I don't get that invoice in, if I don't sort that, I've got 10 people's wages I've got to pay at the end of the month, and I haven't got the money in the bank to pay it. And they're going through all these challenges, or more often than not, with the guests that I speak to on the podcast, I hear stories of where they've gone through such adversity in throughout their lives, and starting the business was, like, as I said earlier, for myself, is the only choice open to them, the only thing that they felt that they could do to fix something that was broken in their lives. And they do that, and then they bring people along on that journey with them, and they're fascinating stories. And there's been a couple of them where I found myself feeling quite emotional as they're talking about what they've been through. And yet, the news stories you see in the media paints a very different picture of business owners. And there's a general public perception out there that if you run your own business, you're minted, you're rolling in it, you've got an easy life, you're slacking, you've got all your lackeys doing all your work for you because you've just got the life of Riley. And that's so much further from the truth that this podcast exists to actually tell the story of small business owners, not the big celebrities you see on TV and things, but actual real people that you'd walk past in the street, you'd meet without even realizing it at the petrol station, the supermarket, and what they go through to create these businesses and to create careers and jobs and opportunities for people. And some of the stories have just blown me away. So yeah, it's a Drive, a small business podcast. Wherever you get your podcasts, you're from, wherever you listen, Apple, Spotify, I'd encourage anybody to have a listen and listen to what the real stories are that make up, say, 98, 99% of all companies in the UK and what they go through.
No, it's every fortnight, isn't it, Richard? Did you say they
every fortnight? Yeah.
Does it come out at a particular time, day, or?
It comes, if we get our timing right on the technology, it comes out at the early hours of the morning every Tuesday. Every other Tuesday.
Yeah.
So the next episode coming out next week is a young lad. I say young lad, I can say that, yeah, because I'm nearly 50. A young lad who started up an online accounting platform and a bank, because he just felt that he could, and even though everybody was telling him not to do it, he still went ahead and did it. And the latest episode that was just came out last week was a lady called Jo, who, such a compelling story. She met somebody at prenatal classes. They ended up becoming friends. Their children ended up being born on, could you figure it, on the same day, and went into business together. And then her friend was hit with, they had a couple of challenges, which are part of the story, but when her friend was hit with a completely debilitating illness that attacked her brain to the point where she was unable to walk, talk, feed herself. And her friend had to learn all those skills again. And they had a team of people, a business, they're in business together. She had to help her friend and keep the business afloat. And these are, such an unassuming lady that you wouldn't even notice in the street or in the queue in a shop. The fascinating stories.
Yeah, I think listening to, if you like, real business owners' stories, you're always going to get something from that. So thanks for the plug, Richard. Thanks for your time today. I appreciate you're a busy man, but hopefully we've covered quite a bit of ground that anybody watching this live or on the replay will find useful. So we'll end it there. Thank you very much.